Income inequality and wealth inequality is a rising problem in various parts of the world. You've experienced it, I've experienced it, basically all of us have experienced it. Inequality does raise questions like why my CEO earns 7 figures while I barely put up 4 to 5 figures. So how do billionaires become billionaires? When you see inequality as such, you search in Google for the world's most unequal places in the hopes of finding your country. And voila! You get a different place such as South Africa as a result. Like me, you would have probably been deceived by the result. If you're curious, you'll probably ask yourself why South Africa is so unequal, yet it is still developed. What if I told you countries like Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Iraq are some of the most equal places in the world? Would you believe me? Probably not. But if you were to search on Google, I'd be proved right. Now, I know this is a little appalling, and I am confusing you because you're probably sitting there asking how would underdeveloped countries be the most equal place in the world? Now, if you thought long and hard about inequality, you wouldn't think of developed countries like Sweden, Russia, the Netherlands, and the United States as unequal. Probably because everyone lives a comfortable life in these countries. Well, I can't say much for Russia, but we can all agree that the Swedes, the Dutch, and Americans live a solid and comfortable life. But what if I told you those countries are ranked as the most unequal places in the world? Again, you probably wouldn't believe me, but keep watching so you can get your answers. Let's take the Netherlands as an example. Netherlands Invest in Holland landing page welcomes users with the statement, "The Dutch economy embraces innovation, digitalization, and sustainability." The page goes on to claim how the Dutch economy rivals European and global competitors. Additionally, the page emphasizes that the Dutch economy is welcoming, stable, and a rewarding choice for foreign businesses to invest in. It has stood against the test of time to prove itself as a powerhouse on the global stage. The landing page is filled with smart-sounding words to prove how the Dutch economy is the best based on climate, innovation, infrastructure, and more. However, there's more to it. Enjoying this video so far? Please like and subscribe to this channel. It will help us a lot. Thanks. While the nation is filled with windmills, tulip fields, coffee shops, and lots of weed, much of what they claim is true. The Netherlands is a highly progressive country that practices some of the most revolutionary policies. The Netherlands has an incredibly strong social security system. It has a fantastic universal healthcare system, reliable retirement pensions, and maternity leave allowances. These policies are a rarity in many parts of the world, including developed ones. The Netherlands has stayed true to its claims. The Netherlands' forward-thinking policies trickle down to other parts of the nation, such as relatively high tax rates, protection for the workforce, and more. But all that glitters is not gold. While the Netherlands may seem alluring with its revolutionary policies, it is hiding a not-so-secret secret. According to the World Bank, this forward-thinking liberal dreamhouse nation is the most unequal place on the planet, and the magnitude of the inequality is simply appalling. Now, if you search for the world's most unequal place, you'll probably find South Africa on your screen. However, that's not even half the truth. South Africa has been doing relatively well in controlling its wealth inequality rates. However, in contrast, the Netherlands is the only country in the world that is more unequal than the world itself. Ironically, the Netherlands' forward-thinking policies have been proposed in developed parts of the world as a way to control the issue of wealth inequality. However, if we look at raw data, that is not the case. So, in this video, we'll be discussing the Dutch economy and how they show us that taxes will not equal the playing field. So, how did the Netherlands become so unequal in the first place? Honestly, inequality is complicated to quantify and visualize. There are many ways to determine it and visualize it just to make sense of it, but outside of just numbers and data, we can agree that it's a controversial issue. Wealth inequality is a real issue that deserves proper attention from governments around the world. However, getting their attention is difficult because it's challenging to quantify and visualize wealth inequality in the first place. The equality of countries is usually measured with the Gini coefficient. The Gini coefficient is the measure of statistical dispersion intended to visualize the income inequality or wealth inequality within a nation or any other group of people. While the Gini coefficient quantifies the wealth inequality within a country, it fails to show what that actually means. Now, the Gini coefficient is based on the collective income in contrast to the world's total people. Suppose there's an economy with 4 people and $4 to be gained in annual income. So a perfectly even system would have each of the 4 people earn $1 each. If we looked at each person's cumulative total, we'd get a perfect y equals x line. Our perfect even system would have a Gini coefficient of 0, meaning that everyone earns precisely the same amount. Suppose the economy wasn't so perfect, and all $4 went to one person. Our economy would have a Gini coefficient of 1, meaning that this system couldn't get more unequal because one person controls all the wealth. Practically, real economics are based on billions of people and trillions of dollars, so the actual number typically has many decimals, but they primarily range between 0 and 1. Now that we understand the Gini coefficient, we can use the Gini coefficient to figure out income inequality and wealth inequality in a country. Essentially, income inequality tends to garner more friction from people around the world. People often raise their concerns about how a CEO can earn 300 times more than the average worker. However, what's true is that income inequality catalyzes wealth inequality. This is because people who earn more get to save more, and their savings compound over time if they invest it properly. But what if incomes were more even? Should it stop or control wealth inequality? The answer to that question is more complicated than it seems. The Netherlands is much like the Scandinavian countries. The national social policies are robust and funded by relatively high taxes, which is why, when we look at the World Bank records of income inequality, all of these countries rank very low. Despite the strong relationship between income and wealth, most of these nations have very high wealth inequality. Of course, not as much as the Netherlands. However, Sweden, a sought-after social democracy, has higher wealth inequality levels than the US, Brazil, or India. So, how does a developed country develop wealth inequality? How are smaller groups of people controlling a large portion of the nation's wealth despite sharing very low income inequality? Well, to answer that question, we have to dissect the poorest households. Unlike income, where the lowest you can earn annually after taxes is $0, your net worth can be negative. For example, someone with a very high loan debt that doesn't have any assets can have a negative worth. While the Netherlands' policies are very friendly and subsidize many of the nation's needs through taxes, people still have high loan debts through home loans. Usually, getting a home loan may require saving up a deposit, so you own a portion of a property. Banks may take collateral to ensure that you're reliable and that you'll pay your loans when the time comes. However, this isn't the case in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, borrowers can borrow over 100% of their home's value as a mortgage. The National Mortgage Guarantee is a government infrastructure that ensures bank loans on homes. So if the person borrowing is unable to repay the bank, and the bank can't make all of the money it needs back from repossessing the home, the bank is issued a check from the government for the difference, hence making the home loans risk-free. This means that banks get free money from the government when someone can't pay their 110% loan. Additionally, this system is accelerated by the fact that mortgage repayments in the Netherlands are tax deductible, which means that if you earn 50,000 euros in a year and you pay 20,000 euros in interest to the bank on your home loan, you would have to pay tax as if you were earning 30,000 euros. So what does this do to our wealth inequality metric? Well, primarily, it does two things to our wealth inequality metric. It skews the influence of those high taxes. Suppose people can claim significant deductions on high incomes by having large mortgages. In that case, tax rates won't have any importance because they can always be redirected into building a real estate portfolio. On the other hand, it also encourages people to take on debt. Until now, people could borrow up to as much as 110% of their home's value as a mortgage. Suppose a family wanted to buy a €100,000 home. They could borrow 10,000 euros over it and find themselves with a negative net worth of negative 10,000 euros. This could mean that a significant part of the population is down in debt with their homes, and that's something the Gini coefficient fails to quantify. Dutch people may have negative net worths and may still even live life rather comfortably. While raw data may suggest that the Dutch are experiencing yet another tyrannical dystopia, however, that's just not the case. While credit and access to credit for responsible purposes may significantly drive social mobility in an economy, however, at the same time, it can be something that catalyzes wealth inequality beyond the control of regular government intervention. For example, when Kanye claimed to be in billions of dollars in debt, it didn't mean he was poor to the point of no return. He still lived his life on his ranch despite being negatively worth billions of dollars. The main takeaway from this example is that the negative net worth doesn't mean you're poor. However, you may come off as very poor quantitatively. So, what now? Dutch wealth inequality is just a bunch of numbers? Well, no. We have yet to scratch the surface. We can't move without holding the Dutch wealth inequality accountable. Extreme wealth inequality is still a rising issue in the Dutch economy, and matured capitalism might be the driving factor of inequality. Enjoying this video so far? Please like and subscribe to this channel, it'll help us a lot. Thanks. Matured capitalism. The Netherlands was an exemplary nation that economists would often use as the ideal representative of modern capitalism. The Netherlands had incredible systems of trade that spanned over millennia over history. It pioneered modern ideas like the stock market, limited liability companies, and speculative assets back in the 1600s. However, beyond this, the Netherlands hasn't innovated the system in the last 400 years. While the Netherlands may have experienced wars, it didn't spread fear. The wealth in the nation continued to pass their money over generations without the fear of it disappearing. That's why money in the Netherlands is often referred to as old money. Netherlands' wealthiest, well, aren't very wealthy compared to American and Chinese billionaires. To prove our point better, let's look at the nation's wealthiest person, Charlene de Cavallo Heineken. Charlene is 66 years old and is in the beer business. Neither Charlene nor her ancestors founded the Heineken brand we know and love today. However, her ancestors bought a brewery with the family fortune that her great-grandfather slapped his name on. Interestingly, most of her family fortune came from the East India Dutch Company, which means that income taxes couldn't control this wealth. Moreover, quick fact, the Heineken family hasn't earned income since the late 1700s. This means that wealth brings wealth, and the most contributing variable in compounding money is time. While in most parts of the world, wealth is often split between multiple heirs who will eradicate the family fortune. However, the Europeans do things a little differently. The European elites tend to leave most of the family's fortune to a selected heir who's trained to keep the family assets as protected and as restrained as possible. The other children continue to live very comfortable lives, however, the fortune doesn't split equally. Suppose you're from a wealthy family, and you have a family structure that has been there for ages. Instead, you would get 100% returns on your portfolio that is doubling every year for 10 years straight. Or, would you instead get 10% return for 100 years? Now let's assume for 100 years, these are all compounded annually, and both examples start with 5,000 euros. Well, our investor with a 10-year outlook turned that 5,000 into 5 million. In contrast, our investor with a 100-year outlook walks away with $68,903,061. This is without inflation. The investor with a 100-year outlook didn't have unrealistic return expectations, and interestingly, this proves that time in the market beats timing in the market. Considering you have over 300 years in the market, that's automatically going to create significant wealth concentrations. So, does this mean as capitalism matures, it creates more inequality? Unfortunately, yes. While this system may not hurt other countries that don't have the same inheritance dynamic, we can see with the Netherlands, it's not the world's 1% who will change these figures. It's the hundreds of families that go under the radar that will. Now, is this a problem we should be concerned about? Not really, because like me, you'd rather be in the Netherlands' bottom 10% than in the bottom 10% of an underdeveloped country. Or you'd rather be in the Netherlands' bottom 10% than in the top 10% of an underdeveloped country. That shows that inequality isn't a problem as long as there are equitable systems in place to make sure everyone has the chance to rise and experience comfort, safety, and that the well-being of ordinary people is not sacrificed in the name of the profits for the rich. The Netherlands has an undoubtedly large economy, which is just shy of $1 trillion. It has an impressive GDP per capita of $60,000 per person, with income that is spread very evenly. Interestingly, while the Wealth Gini index for the Netherlands is at 0.902, it only has an income Gini index of 0.27, one of the lowest globally. The Netherlands is easily one of the most stable and confident nations globally and has been for the last 400 years. So, what are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section, and we hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.